or reservation policy, the roots lie in the Constitution. I'll come around to that. And roster has been, again, a tool to implement reservation policies, especially in education and higher education. So I'll come around to that. I hope my screen is visible by now.
Okay.
Oh, and that's a pity. Okay. Now, what I wish to place is the dictionary meaning of reservation is the action of reserving something. Okay, that everybody knows. But then, interestingly, if you did the, if you check the dictionary on your phone, the smartphones, it would also give you the example of the reservation of positions of non-Americans. That's an example that the dictionary on your smartphones brings out with the meaning of reservation. Okay.
Excuse me, ma'am. Once. Yeah. Is there what browser are you using?
Chrome.
Yeah. Okay. So there should be a pop-up asking for permission for sharing this thing. Is it there?
Oh, I did that. I had tried it earlier. Well, let me go back. But was I audible earlier?
Yeah, you are audible now, but the screen is not being present.
Earlier when I tried it worked, but so I was hoping it is working. Is it visible now?
Yes. Yeah, it's visible now.
Oh, great. Okay. So this was my title page. I've spoken about it. This is the gate of the university where I am right now the Vice Chancellor, and I've been away from JNU for the past 4 months. It's been strange and not strange though, but challenging and therefore nice. Okay. Well, I was on this slide, and what I wanted to, I was speaking about is if you interestingly, if you try to check the meaning, dictionary meaning of reservation, this is the example you see. However, what I wish to state is the history of reservation in India is not a new thing, okay? Or historically, India has had reservation, and especially in jobs, and or rather we would find in Indian history or history of India, the history of reservation for jobs. Now, how do I substantiate this? What I would like to say is the caste system is actually the strict structure and the system which has done this reservation, okay? And there, it was not by merit, but by birth, okay? By one's own genetic makeup, because you and I were born in certain family, which belonged to certain caste, our jobs were predefined. And so I would like to, and this is not my original idea, one of my friends from my previous institution, I have borrowed this concept from him. I wouldn't want to use his name, but yeah, therefore, I would like to make the statement that history of reservation in India is quite an old one. In fact, it's deeply rooted, and it is rooted, and it turned out to be a caste system. Okay, so and so therefore, for certain kinds of jobs, you needed to be born in that caste, and only then you could do that. Or in fact, even education for that matter. Unless you and I were born in certain castes, we couldn't be educated too. So therefore, I would like to pitch the word reservation at that. Okay. And so, but then reservation policy with historically, it turned out to be uglier and uglier again, to the extent the rights of citizens were also denied. And what about not various privileges, but just a basic right of equality. Okay, right to be treated as human, right to be treated with dignity was also deprived, and that went on to get uglier. The possessions were also taken away. I mean, people were dispossessed of what they owned earlier. And so it got muckier, and it got more and more painful and ugly. However, I think we have had the history, again, we have had a history of great thinkers in our country, starting from, sometimes certain historians would like to bring in the names of Raja Ram Mohan Roy, who talked about Sati Pratha and etc., and how he would try to demolish that. But we have had also history of the Phule couple. Okay, we have had history of others, such thinkers who have been social thinkers, who had taken efforts to break that system, which confined the person to only doing certain kind of job. And so therefore, I think the beginning of what we see now as reservation policy does lie somewhere and around the era when Phule couple was so convinced that education was one of the ways in breaking those chains of the system called caste system. And only if one was educated would be able to even exercise within the given restrictions that could be right as a human also. So, and that continued to come up to even if we try to quote the experience of Gandhi in South Africa, but then there weren't substantial work done until and unless Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, Baba Saheb Ambedkar, he with his life experience was then able to see the definite tools which could possibly bring about this vision of equality, justice, fraternity, and etc. that he tried to enshrine in the Indian Constitution. Okay? Therefore, reservation policy, as we see in India, is, which in other places, other countries, is otherwise known as affirmative action. The objective of reservation policy is affirmative action. What is that? That is representation of historically and even currently disadvantaged groups in Indian society. Okay, so those who have been historically systematically deprived of privileges as citizens, and education being one of the education, health care, and etc. But then education being the one of the primary it's not a privilege but a right, have been denied. So therefore, the objective of affirmative action was to have representation in education, representation in employment, representation in politics. And what we would see, we can see the Article 15 of the Constitution of India, and mostly more specifically, we have Article 16, again A, B, and etc., which have more categorically verbalized the provisions to ensure that any socially and educationally backward class or citizens coming from these classes could have access to, or who could have representation in education and employment and even politics. And so equality, which has been envisaged as per the Constitution of India, could be only possible with the policy making rights for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes who have been historically disadvantaged. Okay, disadvantaged from having representation in access to education, or even jobs, anywhere the employment may be. besides the kind of job that was traditionally done as a family tradition or confining to the caste system. So this is what was the objective of reservation policy. So, but then how is it that to be done? Because there were this historical disadvantages. So, I mean, therefore, it was seen that, okay, let me use another thing. Just mention it before I forget, is reservation is also not reserving a specified share to some people. So it's not like share of the pie. Okay, that if the percentage of population is X, then there should be X% of share that must be reserved. It's not that. In fact, the policy as is verbalized and also needs to be implemented likewise is by way of allowing that in order to make way for that representation, reservation policy guides that there be relaxation in age. For example, if let's say if 22 years or 25 years is supposed to be the maximum age for applying for something in job, then maybe you'd see on a standard basis, like, there is a 5 years relaxation. Now, those 5 years relaxation, so a person with a maximum age of 30 could, but then coming from the disadvantaged groups could avail that. Okay. Now, the second thing which normally comes and becomes the biggest bone of contention is the relaxation in the eligibility marks. We can discuss a lot on this, and there can be a lecture just on this. But then we do see that if the eligibility to apply, let's say for an JNU or somebody to be eligible to apply, 55% is the minimum. That's the minimum eligibility marks, or that's the minimum mark that one is required to have in order to participate in the entrance exam of JNU. But then the students or aspirants coming from the disadvantaged groups, specifically SC and ST, they have a 5% of relaxation, and so for them it becomes 50. Okay, so there is a fixed measure, a quantum, which is allowed to be used for relaxation. Likewise for fee, even sometimes for application fee. And also fee, once one gets admission, also there may be fee concession, it is said, and that's the relaxation. So reservation policy, basically, in order to achieve that representation, tries to do or specifies, these are the specifications, that there be relaxation. The second thing is also about reservation policy across the country. We do have that there have been a Supreme Court order. I do know some of the lawyers must be also participants listening, but who can help us. I think Indra Sahni case, or one of the cases, that in the judgment mentioned that the reservation for disadvantaged groups of their representation cannot exceed 50%. Okay, so that's the ceiling. 50%. Okay, 50% of the share only, maximum 50% of the share only can be reserved. Okay, which has got a good and side, also positive, and the negative side also. The negative is, therefore, not negative is not the what I'm saying is not really negative. Now, if 50% of the space is reserved, that's not the proportionate share of the population who is going to be allowed to avail this kind of relaxation. Okay, so therefore 50% is less than the percentage share of the population, and therefore what I said earlier, this is not a share. That reservation policy does not allow access to the so-called fair share, but it's not proportionate share. All right, so reservation is there only for 50%. The third thing we need to be mindful of, a reservation policy is applied, and these days you would see the policies also say there is a vertical reservation. Okay, and there is something called a horizontal reservation. Now, what is vertical? You put, I mean, most of you are science students, and therefore I can talk about in the histograms, right? Each bin is a vertical. It goes by the number of instances, right, or frequency of the case, right? So therefore, if we consider a bin for SC, bin for ST, a bin for OBC, now the SC and ST, the reservation for ST and SC is rooted in the articles in the Constitution, right? The OBC reservation has come about by the Act and it was also accepted in the Parliament. Likewise, Act of Parliament is also the reservation for people with disability, so PWD or physically challenged also, as we say. Okay, and most recently we've had the latest amendment of 2019 also brings about reservation for economically weaker section. Okay, so we have these many sections only, or categories, for which we have the 5 SC, ST, OBC, physically challenged, and EWS. Okay, so we've got 5 categories for which there can be a reservation. Now we can imagine the histogram sort of thing for SC, for ST, for OBC, and for physically challenged, for the PWD. Okay, now so therefore that becomes vertical, and there depending on the size of the bin, certain percentage of that bin is going to be reserved for that category. Okay, but that's not the case for people with disability. It is said that reservation for people with disability would be horizontal, which means there cannot be another bin called physically challenged and then have whatever percent, 3% was earlier, but now it's become 4% in most of the states. Okay, 4% used to be reserved for like a quota. The word quota also used to be used earlier, okay, for the PWD, but now it is no more. For the PWD section, it is said to be horizontal. Why? Because in each of these categories, that is scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, people coming from OBC background but non-creamy layer, and also economically weaker section. In each of these sections, we can find physically challenged people because this is a natural disadvantage, okay? And this nature-based or natural disadvantage can be observed prevalent in each of these 4 categories. And therefore, it has been said that for people with disability, it be horizontal. Okay, so I'm up with my slides here. However, I have a couple of things to state, and I think I'll stop sharing the slide here. But I'll go back to conclude in few minutes this part of the presentation. Okay, I should have made the slides bringing especially showing you the articles and the statements of the articles. But what I want to mention is there is something called the roster. Okay, the roster system. We can again get into the dictionary meaning of the roster. But what roster system does is, especially I can talk about in employment, because it is not easy to talk about roster for education. All right. So in employment, there is something called the roster, which is a best found mechanism so far. It is not the best fitting, but so far for implementing reservation, this is considered to be the best of the options so far. I hope somebody comes up, one of you IITians comes up with a better solution. All right. Now, what roster does is, suppose we, okay, now we do, all of us know some of these numbers, right? It is said that 15% would be reserved for people coming from schedule. This is the national percentage. 15 for SC, 7.5 for ST, 27% for OBC non-creamy layer, okay, 10% EWS category. Now the EWS will come later because see, before everything that 50% ceiling decision was made, EWS category was not there. Okay, so EWS category comes even after that. So the EWS would come outside the 50%. Okay. So what happens is, in order to implement the reservation for, and then percentage, which you would have seen, see, unless there are, okay, look at the fraction, 7.5, all right? We cannot have 7.5 people recruited out of 100, right? And therefore, what you would hear is a 200-point roster. What does that mean? If there are 200 vacancies, then 14 persons can be there. Now, this is simple arithmetic, but how does this, how do these 14 people get distributed over 200? Okay, so there is a formula, a number, okay, which is applied for post-based reservation. Okay, post-based roster. So roster also is roster. The word roster has come about when it was decided that reservation would be post-based. Okay, it would be easier for me to illustrate if I consider the percentage of Jharkhand. Now in Jharkhand, if some of you have pens, you can just write down. In Jharkhand, the reservation for ST is 26%. Okay, for SC it is 10%. For OBC, there are two sections, but both together is 14%. So now this way it sums up to 50. All right. Now, if you see, 50% is reserved. So if I have 100 vacancies, 50% is reserved, and so it becomes easy. Now, if first post is unreserved, the second post needs to be reserved, right? So all odd numbered posts are unreserved, so that becomes 50%, and all even numbered posts be reserved. And so how does, now comes the task of allocation of the category for which a post number would be earmarked. Okay, so therefore, since here in Jharkhand it is 26% is for ST and 24% is for the remaining. So therefore, the first reserved post is given to the ST. Okay. And in fact, you see, so therefore, and now since all these numbers, 26, 10, and 14, in 14 also comes as 8 plus 6. So, you know, should I summarize soon? Okay, all right. So what happens is here, it is also possible to have a 50-point roster because you see, these numbers are even numbers. All the numbers are even numbers. So I mean, even the half would be integer, and even when only when we go to 25 posts, then it becomes a floating point, right? A real number. So then it becomes a problem. So therefore, in Jharkhand, it is a minimum is a 50-point roster, or they have somehow worked out even a 11-point roster. What does this mean? In the 11 points, post number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 up to 11, they're able to allocate in each of the even numbered posts, or they have been earmarked each of the even numbered posts to SC, to ST, to the two categories. There are BC1 and BC2. Okay, so both of these two categories they have been able to allot, and so and since EWS category is also the 10%, and that has come about now in 2019. So recently, what has happened is what they've done is given the 10th position out of 100 to the EWS category. Now you'd say that the 10th position also could be to the SC. Yeah. So there are ways to resolve the ties. Okay, so if I had been able to make my slide, it would have been easier. But I hope during the time Dr. Deepak is speaking, I'll be able to get those formulae in, so that if there are specific questions during the question answer session, I'll be able to answer them. So I think it is now what I said is, if so, once a roster is prepared in an institution, so therefore in employment, for teaching as well as non-teaching, there is another flavor which comes into the picture in order to reduce the number. You see, when the number is reduced, number of vacancies is reduced, then it becomes not difficult, it becomes impossible also to make have scope or make provision for that representation. For example, unless in a department there are which is under central government, unless there are 14 vacancies or 14 positions, not even one ST because of 7.5 percentage would have a scope to be employed under reserved category. Okay, the person, each one of us may have an equal claim over the unreserved post. However, but we know, and I'm sure from Dr. Deepak's presentation, we are going to see how it is never a fair trial, not trial, but a fair race. Okay, and so there are always hurdles after hurdles which make the race not difficult, but then it is like candidates or applicants coming from socially disadvantaged backgrounds, marginalized backgrounds, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and non-creamy layer OBCs. Women also have been outrightly denied. Okay, because for a long time, I'm sure you would be able to find in the history books as to when was the first girl given admission in civil engineering. So because it was said like, no, women should not study engineering. But coming back to this, so what I was saying is, okay, if the number of vacancies are small, let's say less than 14, let's say 13 also, there would not be a scope to reserve a place for an SD. Now, so since the number becomes crucial, and therefore, while implementing reservation, even at the institution, it is said the institution must implement reservation policy and fulfill the requirement. Okay, it's a constitutional mandate and must do this and that. But what happens is, those who are decision makers to implement this reservation policy, they'll say, okay, we'll do it department wise, because every department must have representation. But then it is being seen that these segments are made so small that it becomes difficult to implement reservation. For example, when I was being cited here in my university, some of the it's easy to quote and put the blame on those which are affiliated colleges, which are not directly under the control of the university. So they also, some of them may have certain designation, and therefore they would have a different, they would have freedom from not obliging to certain conditions. But reservation for SC/ST is mandatory. Yet what they would do is they would advertise only one post or two posts. Okay, and there they would say, okay, we would since there are only two posts. So where do we? What is the 15% of 2? Where is what is the 15 of 7.5% of 2? And therefore reservation is not possible. All right. So, and since it is the 27% is there for OBCs, so therefore it has been possible that the third post could be earmarked for OBC. Okay, and things like this. So you see, there have been these tactics optics of making implementation of reservation impossible also. And so I think it is important for us to either understand the mechanism or tools such as roster as to how that is being made, the roster is being made, and then ask the right question in respect of roster if the institute claims that there is post-based roster to implement reservation policy. But if it is not, then we need to devise mechanisms. So what happens in admissions also, okay? And there again, in admission also, we've had our own struggles in JNU to say that reservation is only to be, this relaxation is only to be applied to those who do not make it to, let's say now 50%. Let's say if we are making a merit list of everybody who is qualified, let's say in certain department in IIT Madras, all right? So you make a merit list, and this 50% needs to be reserved and 50% may not be reserved. So whatever is the strength or intake capacity, the half of that is where we need to put the cutoff. Okay, so that percent becomes the cutoff mark. And everybody who is above that cutoff mark should be offered admission without anything as unreserved. Okay, what used to happen even in JNU, and what there were different bins that were created, different merit lists which were prepared for those who came from privileged background, advantaged background, then for scheduled caste, then for scheduled tribe, and so on and so forth. And from each of those, the numbers were taken up. So even if there was a candidate who had scored marks higher than the cutoff mark for the unreserved category, would still be given offered admission as under the quota of that, but which was wrong, because that was against the spirit of reservation. And over a period of time, JNU it was possible for us to educate JNU people, and that we got that done, at least for admission. So in admission, this is what needs to be observed. All those, once the merit list is prepared, and after that, those who qualify as per the cutoff mark, their social background does not matter. And so this again brings the spirit of at least equality there. But then unless reservation policy is implemented in this fashion, the scope for equality, the scope for dignity of each person as equal humans, and not be viewed by the caste or the family background or the social background, that would not go. And therefore, I'm kind of happy that reservation policy does not give the share proportionate to the percentage of population, but the reservation policy, which is in India, does try to, it aspires to provide scope for and to achieve equality, which is one of the primary pillars, and is articulated so well in the preamble of our Indian Constitution. So I think I would stop at this moment. I think it would be interesting and it would be good and educational to listen to Dr. Deepak Malkam, and probably if I'm able to get my formulae up on my slide and corresponding the questions that may follow later, I'll be happy to answer. I may not be able to guarantee you the right answer, but I may try to attempt to answer the questions. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and hats off to you guys, the organizers of this evening's meeting, and thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your wonderful talk. And now we'll move to the second part. Professor Deepak, can you unmute your floor is open to you. Hello. There is an issue with this platform last week that Professor Deepak Mal consent. So kindly use the Google Meet to rejoin the meeting. Like you'll be having the latter part over Google Meet. So can you please check your chat box and find the Google Meet link there?
So hello. So anybody who's still here, we just want to say that you can join the Google Meet link, which is in the comment box.